Great British Manufacturing Podcast, brought to you by MTD, MFG and Jefferson.
Hello and welcome to this week's Great British Manufacturing Podcast. On this week's podcast, we will discuss the positive British manufacturing news in the last 7 days and introduce this week's special guest, who this week is Paul Davies, the President and Managing Director of Alexander Dennis. But before we talk about the news, I'd just like to mention the Factory Now initiative. The Factory Now initiative has been launched to help British manufacturers boost their sales, collaborate and reshore. Members are being added to the site every week with new articles and case studies to discuss. This week, for example, R&D specialist Catax have secured more than £190,000 worth of government tax benefits for its client Chopsticks. More on this and other stories can be found at mtdmfg.com/factory now. Stuart, welcome to the podcast. How are we doing this week?
Yeah, really good. We've got a good eclectic mix of stories and a fantastic guest, so very much looking forward to this week's podcast, Joe.
Yeah, well, let's start. There's more good news coming out of Babcock this week, isn't there?
Certainly is. The British engineering giant has been awarded a £30 million contract to provide dry dock maintenance for the Royal Navy's Queen Elizabeth class aircraft carriers. This will sustain around about 300 jobs. The work will be carried out at Ross Side, where the firm has recently invested more than £100 million. And this follows on from a story that we've covered in previous podcasts. They've started building the first of 5 Royal Navy Type 31 frigates, which is HMS Ventura. And that's at a new assembly plant at the same Scottish site. The firm is also creating 500 jobs to support this 1.25 billion frigate program. So yeah, whole range of good news from Babcock in recent months.
For sure. And notably, they've broken ground on their new production facility as well this week.
Yeah, not too much on this. So it's under construction in Peterborough, and Oatly's new factory, which is a Swedish firm's first in the UK and one of the largest of its type in the world. If anyone's seen the imagery, it's massive, and it will produce around about 300 million litres of oat drink per year. Scheduled to open next year. The Malmo headquartered firm's huge investment is expected to create more than 200 jobs. So it's been particularly popular on social media. The oat drink seems to have a fan base. It's passed me by, but it seems to be very popular.
Yeah, there we are. Maybe we'll get some free samples, Stuart, after the podcast.
Yeah.
But the next one's exciting. I know we've touched on it previously, but £120 million worth of funding for future nuclear projects have been announced this week also.
Yeah, and this fund is designed to unlock and accelerate new nuclear technologies while encouraging new players into the market. It's called the Future Nuclear Enabling Fund. It will help to realise the government's ambition to approve 8 new reactors by the end of this decade, as committed to in the British Energy Security Strategy, which was published last month. And, you know, I think most people are aware now that nuclear power is a key part of the UK's energy mix, helping to reduce dependence on global gas markets, as talked about with Liam at Control Energy last week, boosting the UK's energy independence, which is obviously critical with what's going on in Ukraine, protecting consumers from high energy bills, which again we touched upon last week, and stimulating investment in nuclear as a clean energy technology of the future. So, yeah, very welcome news.
Yeah, and the next one, it's passed me by this story. I've not seen this week, so maybe you can fill me in. But REE Automotive set to open a new assembly plant in the Midlands.
Yeah, the Israeli-owned electric vehicle startup will open a new UK factory and plans to double its workforce in this country as well. And this is one of the first major manufacturing investments from the new wave of makers. Its new production facility in Coventry will be heavily automated, with few direct jobs, but the group expects its total UK workforce to rise from the current 150 to around 300. The assembly plant, which is set to open later this year. And for people not familiar with the company, which is founded by Daniel Burrell in 2013, specializes in integrating electric motors and technology into bespoke corners, as they call them, that can be linked to form the base or platform of a vehicle. So good news to the Midlands.
Yeah, and no doubt that's set to grow, isn't it? Because that technology is certainly not going away. But Stuart, let's take a short pause on this week's news, as I'd like to introduce this week's guest, who is Paul Davies, the Managing Director and President at Alexander Dennis. Paul, a very warm welcome.
Good morning, gents. Thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome. But before we find out more about ADL, can we learn a little bit more about Paul Davies, please? A bit about your career to date and your current responsibilities.
Sure, no problem. Well, I've had the pleasure of spending my entire career in the sort of automotive sector, both in rail and bus. And indeed, I've been with Alexander Dennis now for almost a quarter of a century, which seems quite remarkable. And I was very fortunate to have had a sort of really varied career in terms of my sort of roles and responsibilities. And I came back to the UK in July 2020, which was probably the worst possible time in many respects. Having spent 20 years over in Hong Kong running our Asia Pacific region. Which again was super exciting and gave me a fabulous opportunity to learn about the business. Whether it was growing into new markets, operations development in Asia, and it just been provided me with the tools and skills that have allowed me to sort of step up into the role I've got today, which is to lead the next phase of Alexander Dennis's evolution. As you know, we're 127 years old, so that's an incredible history and something that really keeps me focused in terms of carrying the baton for the next generation. So right now is a really interesting time in our journey, particularly coming out of the pandemic with this transition to sort of net zero and the whole decarbonisation agenda that we're tackling at the moment.
Fantastic. And now a brief overview of Alexander Dennis, if that's possible. A bit about the history, the product range, etc.
Yeah, sure. As I say, we were founded in 1895, which is incredible when you think about it. We're still the the oldest and the biggest bus and coach manufacturer in the UK, but we're not just about the UK. We're very lucky to have an international business. We started in Asia back in the 1970s, but we've grown. Elsewhere, we now sell buses into the likes of as far away as New Zealand. We have a European footprint and also, quite a big vehicle population in the North American market. So, we don't just, although we are British based, we consider ourselves very, very much global. We're still the largest employer in the UK in our sector. We have more than 2,000 employees at the moment, including our manufacturing sites in Falkirk and Scarborough. From a product range standpoint, we offer the full suite of products. We typically will do what our customers ask us for. So from single deck to double deck. We also have the coach brand Plaxton, which was founded in 1907. So again, a long history, and it's all things to all people, if you like. I think is the reason why the business has been successful historically, and that's something that we're absolutely focused on to ensure that we've got a bright future. And just to finish off, if you like, is in 2019 we became part of the RFI group. They acquired Alexander Dennis in May 2019, and again, I think it's been really positive for us to be part of a much bigger international business.
Morning, Paul. It's Stuart. Thanks for joining us. Fascinating to hear about your personal background and the history and product range within ADL. Just to further illustrate the company, would you mind just giving us a brief summary of the contracts you've recently won? Because in recent times, it's almost every month we've covered great news stories, positive news stories from Alexander Dennis on the MTD and Jefferson networks.
Sure. Well, thanks for your coverage. There's lots to talk about, and a number of really exciting initiatives and sort of contracts that I can sort of run around the world almost in many respects. Probably starting in the UK, obviously as part of the transition to zero emissions. We were delighted to win the Liverpool City Council hydrogen tender. So that's for hydrogen fuel cell electric double-deck buses, and we're going to start delivering those later this year. And the really cool thing about that win was it was the first I would call it really commercially open tender for hydrogen double decks. We were delighted to win that, and really excited. The first vehicles, actually I was on them yesterday in the factory, and about to start the testing cycle. So that's an exciting one. Through the all-electric bus town initiative, we've also been awarded 130 double-deck EV buses for National Express. And again, those buses will start to be delivered this year. So again, that's really, I would just say, adding to the overall speed of transition to electric. And then sort of, harking back to my time in Hong Kong, we've also won an order from the Kowloon Motor Bus Company, which is Hong Kong's largest bus operator, for the first of our integral 3-axle, battery electric double deck buses, and that's really significant. As I said earlier on, we've been selling to the Hong Kong market from since the 1970s. And clearly, with China being the heartland of sort of battery electric buses, both from a supply chain and also complete bus supply standpoint, to be able to continue that journey in Hong Kong is hugely important to us. But I think, but in addition to that, I would also just call out a couple of other ones. Although the zero emissions transition is at the forefront of everybody's mind, diesel still has a place in many sectors, and we're in the process of delivering a contract of 200 left-hand drive, 3-door, 2-staircase double-deck buses to BVG in Berlin, which again is a hugely significant achievement for us. And just to sort of underline the customization point I made a while ago, we're also supplying 3-door, 2-staircase right-hand drive buses to the Land Transport Authority in Singapore. So, it's all things to all people, as I said, and we've made it our business to ensure that we can, first of all, respond to our customers' needs from a product standpoint, but also serve every sector of the market, because the UK market, for example, you have big groups, you have major independents, but then you also have the smaller retail customers, as it were, and we want to make sure that we can service all of our customers.
No, absolutely, and the Berlin story last year was one of the top 5 stories on the site in the whole year. It was so popular and so welcome. One of the other stories covered last year, I believe there's some reshoring announced as well with chassis production, and that's on to my next question. Really, I know you touched on Falkirk and Scarborough. Would you mind just giving our listeners an overview of your manufacturing sites in the UK, what they do, capability and product range, and how it's organised really internally, if you wouldn't mind, Paul?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we have 2 main sites in the UK, as you said, Falkirk and Scarborough. We also have a smaller site in Larbert, which we use for first off build. So, for example, the hydrogen buses are being produced in the Larbert factory. In terms of size and scale, Falkirk's roughly 700 people, Scarborough's 900 people. So, 2 sort of, we're a significant employer in those areas. The only difference between the sites in terms of manufacturing capability is the Plaxton coach buses, the Plaxton coaches rather, are only produced in Scarborough. But effectively, we've set the both sites up to be able to sort of effectively be able to build any type of bus product that we're selling. So, for example, the BVG contract, those buses are being built in Scarborough at the moment. Scarborough hadn't built the sort of large high-capacity air-conditioned buses before. So, again, the guys that have done an absolutely fantastic job to reshape the factory to be able to accommodate, new product types. And, of course, talking about zero emissions transition, again, we've had to sort of adapt both of the sites as we continue that journey, because there are subtle differences in terms of how you build a zero emission bus compared to a conventional diesel bus. So, there's some big investment has taken place. There's more to come. I mean, because clearly it's not just about facilities; it's about our people. We're nothing without our team members, and that's another area where we have to remain focused in terms of training, upskilling. Our apprenticeship programs, they start to take a different form. So, for example, automotive electrical skills are reasonably hard to come by. There's a big demand for them. So we're having to sort of be more creative in terms of how we shape apprentice schemes, for example, and how we make them much more focused, much more specific for our application, for our industry. So, at the moment we've got about 40 odd apprentices going through the programme, and we're working with our local education partners to make sure that we can make those fit for purpose for the future.
No, fantastic. Great to hear that you're investing in the next generation of coach builders. And we call the Great British Manufacturing Podcast. It'd be remiss of me not to ask, what, in your personal view, how important is it, what the advantages of and any challenges of building in Britain?
Well, I think you can't understate the importance of it, and it's not just in terms of local employment in the UK, not even just from a manufacturing standpoint, but we've tried in the past to put a number on the amount of jobs that we affect through the supply chain, and it's not insignificant. These are high valued, skilled jobs, and we should be doing everything we can to not just sustain them, but grow them. And also, I talked earlier on, without the foundation of a really strong UK business, our ability to go and do some of those things internationally, whether it's Berlin, whether it's Hong Kong, Singapore, New Zealand, Canada, US, etc. We would struggle to do that if we did not have that UK bedrock, if you like. So that is really significantly important. The other point I would make is, double deck is a bit of a sort of UK niche product, if you like, and as are the minibuses that we supply. So there are not an endless list of alternative options out there. So in terms of just supporting the sort of British requirement for those types of products is shouldn't be underestimated as well.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. I'd like to move on back to the supply chain, if possible. What are the challenges and trends you're experiencing in the market? As I say, supply chain, price rises, cost of living, etc.
Yeah, well, that's a daily conversation at the moment, as I'm sure you can appreciate, and it's affecting all industries in different ways. Clearly we do find ourselves in a hyperinflation environment. Energy costs this year have been really difficult to manage, and continue to do so. We're seeing some of our core raw materials, whether that's steel, aluminium, doubling, tripling, if not more, at different times. And actually just getting access to components, because when you think about it, bus manufacturing is relatively low volume compared to car. So if you find yourselves using similar components to full scale automotive, as it were, you're not really going to be a priority. So it is a huge challenge. Not a day goes by at the moment where either we have a supply chain hiccup that's impacting our production, or indeed a request for a price increase because of the impact of raw materials and energy costs. So, although we thought that the pandemic and everything that brought was a big a challenge in itself, we're wrestling with new challenges as we sort of get out the end of it. So it is a bit of a constant battle.
So what support would you like to see from organisations within the sector and even UK government?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of support. I think that the pandemic has forced the industry together a bit more. There's many more conversations. There's many more much more connectivity, if you like. We've seen different speeds of assistance. If you take Scotland, for example, the Scottish government allocated funds and deployed it fairly easily and fairly quickly, which was helpful as we tried to get the industry back on its feet. Clearly the UK government has schemes as well. The Zebra scheme was launched with a commitment to bring 4,000 zero emission buses onto the road. That's a slightly different flavour as it requires much more interaction between the local authorities and the local bus operators. We've been quite consistent in our message to government that the funding, the application, how that's applied and the speed of application is really quite critical for us, because it hasn't been as fast as we would have liked, and that is an area where we could do with just keeping the focus on making sure that the industry can meet the net zero targets.
Fantastic. And just a final one for me, if possible. ADL, you tend to be ahead of the technology curve and getting your customers to adopt the latest technology. What's next, for the rest of this year and beyond, I guess?
Yeah, well, some of the things, unfortunately, I can't share with you because they're still under wraps. I mean, all I would say is, the speed of transition has been, way faster than any of us would have anticipated, and I think we have the pandemic to almost thank for that in some respects. From an ADL standpoint, we are undertaking at the moment, I would say, the most significant and important product development activity in the company's history. And as I say, I can't share all of the details with you on this podcast, sadly. But you follow us closely, so watch this space in the weeks and months ahead. But we've got some, it's an exciting time for our industry. We've got a fantastic team of engineering product development talent that have got a track record of really nailing some first class products to some really customers, markets. As I said, we've got that global track record, and we are absolutely committed to make sure that we can continue to support our customers on that journey to net zero. So, as I say, watch this space.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining us. As you say, we cover you a fair bit. There's always plenty of news coming out of Alexander Dennis. So I wish you all the best for the onward success. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. It was great to finally catch up.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to talk to you.
Stuart, we cover Alexander Dennis a lot, don't we? That was a fascinating interview. It's great to have him on.
Absolutely, and the range of new contracts, and obviously so much going on in that market, and fascinating to hear about Paul's background and learn more about ADL and the sites in Falkirk and Scarborough, etc.
Yeah. So the next one, 50 million data innovation hub set to help manufacturers improve productivity. It's a good headline, but what can you tell us about the story?
Yeah, so UK manufacturers are to have their productivity and competitiveness boosted thanks to a new digital smart factory and testbed, and this is based at Ulster University. The £50 million Smart Manufacturing Data Innovation Hub will support small and medium-sized manufacturers to capture and better utilise their data, helping them to increase productivity, growth and sustainability. Nearly 10,000 manufacturers are expected to benefit from the hub, and 13,000 jobs will be supported, helping to boost economic growth and level up regions across the UK.
Wonderful news. This next one's a bit of a monster. Plans have been revealed to establish 150 million residual waste and renewable gas facility at Teesworks. Is there any more room up there?
It's, well, I don't know. Hopefully, we'll be having Ben Houchin, who's been instrumental in securing this inward investment. Ben Houchin will be on a future podcast, so we can ask him more about it then, Joe. So, Circular Fuels is behind the plant, which will take non-recyclable residual waste from households and industry and convert it into renewable dimethyl ether. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is a safe and cost-effective clean burning fuel. The fuel behaves in the same way as LPG and can be stored in cylinders and used by properties and industry not connected to the UK's national gas grid. More than 200 jobs will be created during the construction phase. An additional 50 jobs will be created once the plant is operational in 2024. And when it's up and running, the plant will have capacity to produce around 50,000 tonnes of fuel per year.
Yep, brilliant. And this next one, it's they're a big company. Not everyone knows of Megger, but Megger have secured funding to expand its site in Devon. I picked this one up a couple of days ago, and it's more welcome news.
Certainly is, and it's not a company that we've talked about before on this podcast. So the electrical testing equipment manufacturer, this is part of a £130 million loan facility to support the company's next phase of growth and enable further investment in green technologies at its manufacturing headquarters in Dover. UK Export Finance have guaranteed 80% of the new loan, and provided by HSBC and Commerzbank, I think, under the government's Export Development Guarantee Scheme, and which is designed to drive major investment to a wide range of UK exporters. And this will allow Megger to expand its UK exporting capacity and invest £50 million upgrading its factory in Dover, supporting and creating new highly skilled green jobs at the site.
And the final story this week, it's a nice one. McLaren, they're set to invest in the next generation of Formula One engineers.
Yeah, it's always great to have a good STEM story to finish with. The University of Sheffield AMRC Training Centre, they're set to provide apprenticeships to trained engineers for McLaren Racing's Formula One team. Starting in September, successful applicants will embark on a level 3 apprenticeship programme in metallic machining, Trainees will divide their study time between AMRC in Rotherham, with on-site experience at McLaren Technical Centre in Woking, Surrey. And they'll learn all aspects really involved with the manufacture of metallic and additive manufacturing components, be able to operate various manual and computer numerical controlled machine tools within the manufacturing department. So fabulous opportunities for young people to join a very, very exciting industry.
And that brings an end to this week's podcast, Stuart. As always, the people at home, we don't have time to cover every story in this short podcast. But if you'd like to go to mtdmfg.com, you'll find a lot more. Obviously, follow Jefferson, myself, or MTDMFG on Twitter. A big thank you goes to Stuart Whitehead for his time as always. Paul Davies, the Managing Director and President of Alexander Dennis. But as always, the biggest thank you goes to you at home for taking time out of your busy day for listening to us. We'll see you next week.
To the Great British Manufacturing Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating and a review. You can find us on Twitter using @MTDMFG and @Jefferson_MFG.